Okay, all set? All of you able to hear me and see me? All good? We're good to start? Okay, so again, as always, I want your 100% concentration with me. And we are dealing with a topic which has kind of, quite a bit of mind block amongst most of us, feeling that, oh my God, what is this? Okay, but it's not that bad. The problem occurs because we have a limited portion to cover. And whenever we have something to cover partially, it becomes more difficult because there are many important things which are left out, which actually help you to understand things. So that is the basic problem we have when we try to understand statistics, because we cannot go into a whole lot of it. Statistics is it's a very big subject. Okay, so today we'll be again focusing on something which is required for our MCQs, and I'll be dealing with making you understand and making those things as simplified as possible from my side. Okay, but again, I need your whole cooperation in going ahead with that. So when we start with the statistical part, and today I'll be dealing with its theoretical concept, why we use a particular test, and what is this kind of test and what is that kind of test and all that, what kind of data sampling, and we'll be talking about the type of research and all that. Okay, then you'll be applying this to your MCQs. On Friday we have a pre-test discussion for community dentistry. That's whole community dentistry actually. So I've decided to keep as part 1 with statistics and data, and part 2 will be the rest of community dentistry. Okay, so before this pre-test, you should be having your doubts. Get the point? I want this time to include the doubts which are submitted by you all. Okay, so after this theory class, I want you all to read the questions of statistics and start analyzing them, put your brains, read explanations given and all that, and then whatever doubts you're left with, I want you all to post those doubts on forum so that I can include those doubts in our pre-test. Now our pre-test is on Friday, so obviously I need to receive the doubts on Thursday. Okay, I don't need to take a test on Friday. I want to have a proper explanation ready for you all on that day. So I need to get these MCQs doubts on Thursday. Will that be okay? Now you'll think, okay, what if I have doubts later? Okay, now after the pre-test, after your test, still there are chances that you may have certain doubts. Now those doubts we'll be dealing with in our revision doubt solving session. Okay, does it all seem okay with statistical part? Yeah, so shall we start? Okay, there are a few fact-based information which I'll be giving you in the beginning. Herein we are talking about phases in the history of public health. Initially, in the early days in 1880s, 1920, it was a disease control phase wherein disease would start and, major health community will try to prevent the spread of the disease. That was a phase. Now, these phases are very theoretical and you have to remember the years and their names. Okay. Then, in 1920, approximately, the health promotion phase started. Herein, the concept of health centers started, and herein the checkup thing came into picture that, okay, before the disease happens, you may have to go in for a checkup of your health and you may have to take care of health. So herein we were promoting health, right? So that was the concept of health center that was first introduced in 1920, and here you have a name to remember, that is, this concept was given by Lord Dawson. Then next came the social engineering phase. This is approximately, it's a recent phase, 1960s to 1980. Herein we started talking about the risk factors. For example, we started talking that smoking was a risk factor for lung cancer. It was found that lung cancer was more common in smokers, isn't it? So therein we started focusing on what are the risk factors, and herein we were trying to focus and controlling the risk factors and all that. That was social engineering phase. And after that came the health for all phase, herein the WHO members, they pledged themselves that we could be able to provide health to all by the year 2000. Okay, so these are the phases of public health. Basically when we say phases, it's like main focus what they were thinking about when they were planning the health for public. Okay. Now, when we talk about personal and community healthcare, now what differs between public health and the normal clinicians, who are giving the personal health, is like when we talk about a practitioner who deals with one person, he's dealing with that one person, his risk factors, his disease and cure and prevention and all that. When it comes to community level, we are dealing with the whole population. We're not dealing about, one person of that population. It's like population as a whole. Right? So, but again, the process is very comparative. So, herein when we talk about a person dealing with, are you able to see my pointer? It's pretty bit light in color today. Okay. So, when we talk about one, patient and versus community, we have certain things to compare. And let me tell you, these are the easy facts and they are a quite important source of MCQs. Okay, so when we talk about an examination in patient, the same thing is conducting survey in community. Okay, what do we do in examination is gather the data by looking at the patient and all that. Same thing we do in survey, what do we do is we gather the data, but herein we do it in community level. Then we have the diagnosis in patient. So once we have the data from the patient, we go ahead and do the diagnosis. But when we come to community, the same survey that gave us the data, we use that data for analysis of the problem in the community. Once here at the patient side, once we have a diagnosis, we plan out the treatment based on the diagnosis. What do we do at the community side? We analyze the problem, once we have the problem, and then based on that problem, we plan a program. Isn't it? Here, once at the patient side, we start the treatment of the patient, but at community side, we start the operation of that particular program. At the patient side, the payment of services by either the insurance company or by the patient to the doctor. Here, community, it comes the financing of the problem. From where the finance comes and, how to gather the finances, whether it's coming from the government sources or some sponsoring bodies and all that. That is where the finance comes here. Okay. And when we come here, right, here we come to evaluation, and after the program planning, program operation in community level, once the finance and everything is done, what happens is, whatever result we get out of it, to make that result standardized, that is what is approval process at community level. At patient level, we are evaluating whether our treatment is taking the effect, isn't it? Whether our treatment was right. So that is a comparison here. Now, you have very direct question on this particular chart. Okay, and it's very easy. All you have to do is just compare it very grossly. Alright? So our survey, diagnosis, alright, diagnosis analysis. Okay, next we come to the proper biostatistics. Now, yeah. So here when we talk about father of health statistic, it is John Grant. Okay, he was not a physician, not a mathematician, but he was father of biostatistics. He did a lot of work on statistics part, the data and its analysis part. Okay. It's very simple, as I was saying, right, the diagnosis in patient is equal to what in survey. Same question. You will find it in your MCQ books. It's very straightforward question that come from there. Okay. It's basically that comparison of patient versus the effect. Okay, do you remember that person we were talking about, the concept of health center in the second phase? Yes, it was Dawson. So those who don't remember, it's just 4 slides. And if you don't remember, the reason is that, what happens whenever we are listening to a lecture, we just think that, okay, we listen. We don't put efforts to remember. Okay, so don't do that. Take it as reading. So have your scrap notes ready. Just keep scribbling or keep typing in the chat box. That will really help you remember things. Okay, so this is the second name we are coming across now. We're talking about the father of health statistics, and it's John Grant. Yeah, Saurav, I got to see that. You're trying to make me know that, okay, this is the same Saurav, isn't it? I know that. Thank you. Okay, come on. So, here, yeah. When we come to biostatistics part, as we already saw, when we saw that chain of things, isn't it? We saw that once we gather the data from survey, we analyze the data. Before we analyze the data has to be properly categorized, isn't it? So, and based on what kind of data we have, then we can apply the proper statistical methods to analyze the data. Are you getting me on this point? So that is why our first step will come to determine the type of data, isn't it? Now, what can be the type of data? Type of data, we can have a qualitative data, we can have a quantitative data. So qualitative data wherein we can know the quality. For example, we can have sex, the presence or absence of malocclusion, and those ways. It's like we cannot measure it, we cannot count it or measure it. That becomes the qualitative data. When it comes to quantitative data is something that can be measured, something like length or weight, or it could be some parameter like blood glucose levels, and it could be anything that we can measure, and we can give a value to that measured thing. Now, again, quantitative data can be of two types. One is discrete. Discrete is something that can be counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, or something that has a proper interval of counting. Right? For example, we are counting the number of deceased teeth, or we are counting the number of pockets, and like that. But when we talk about the continuous data is something which can be anything on a continuous scale. Most common example would be length. It could be anywhere, right? It could be in points, it could be anything. We don't count it as 1, 2, 3, 4. We can count it at 1 point something like that, isn't it? Clear on this? What kind of a data is this one? Okay, good. And what kind of a data is this one? Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll show you the examples, and then you know. Fat and thin, can it be a quantitative data? Fat and thin, can it be a quantitative data? It's fat and thin. Okay, fine. If we take it as weight, it could be a quantitative data, but right now I'm counting the number of fat people and that's a nice point, I appreciate that you're putting your brains there. Wow. Number of thin people and number of fat people. Then, if I say it as number of fat people and number of thin people, if we are having, then it is qualitative data. Its fatness is a quality. Okay. When we talk about the weight and the measurement of weight is a quantity. Okay. Weight is a quantity that will help us determine the quality. Now, it depends, right? Are we talking about fat and thin people, or are we talking about, how much is the weight? When we say weight, we are not classifying them right now. Okay. We are just measuring weight. When we say weight, it becomes quantitative. But when we call them fat or thin, they remain qualitative. Okay? Getting clear on this point? So every example, when you actually try to analyze, see what exactly the example is talking about. Same thing can be, a quantitative aspect of same thing can be applied. A qualitative aspect of same thing can be applied. Okay? Now let's come to the discrete and the continuous where the confusion was. Okay, look at this data. What kind of a data is this? I'm counting the apples. 1 apple, 2 apple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apples. Okay, here I'm counting the number of apples, right? And it's a discrete count. It is 1 apple, 2 apple, 3 apple, 4 apple. I'm not counting as 1.2 apple. I'm not counting as 1.25 apples, isn't it? So I don't have a continuous data. What I have data in the form of is number of apples. So the data is already segregated and I take the portions to count it. I'll use a 19. Are you getting this point? So this is a discrete data. Okay. Yeah. Now when we come to continuous data, now look at this. If I measure something, I can measure on a continuous scale, right? If I have a measurement of heights of people, I can have it in points and it's a continuous scale. Anybody can have height anywhere on the scale. Anywhere, right? It's a continuous data. Okay, so get the point between discrete and continuous. Both are the examples of quantitative. Right? Now from where the data comes? Just now we saw when we were comparing between patient and survey, from where the data comes? The data comes from the population, isn't it? Isn't it? So data comes from population. Can we take the data from whole population? Why not? We can. We can take the data from whole population also. What is that called as? That is called as census. Government does that. Government tries to take the data from whole population. Isn't it? So yes, data can be taken from whole population, but you can understand as far as the researcher point of view, it's a very complicated process to gather the data from every individual. Isn't it? And then if you're supposed to follow it up again, it's gonna be a pain. So this census is done by the government for particular reasons, to maintain the data of the population and all that. So that particular, when we study the whole population, it is called as census. Okay, it's conducted by government by particular duration, wherein they employ a lot of volunteers to do that, and it's a big task. Okay, but most of the time when we come to researchers, what we do is we are not able to study the whole population because it's a very tedious and cumbersome process. So we take a sample out of it. And we say that this sample is equal to population. When we say the sample is equal to population, what does it mean? We are studying samples because we are not able to study the population, but we actually wanted to study the population. So we want our sample to be exactly representing the population. Isn't it? The right thing was to study the population, but we cannot. We cannot count every individual. We can only take a sample. But the point is, we want our sample to be exactly like the population. Isn't it? So, that is why we take the samples. So, in our subsequent slides, we'll be talking about what are the different sampling techniques and how we are trying to make our samples similar to the population. But right now, I'm telling you the sources of data. I'm sorry for deviating. When we say sources of data, now we can actually take the data directly from the subjects. Okay, we say that, okay, we want to take the data from people who are preparing for MDS entrance. Okay, so we directly conduct, we make a survey form, we go to the people who are preparing for the MDS entrance and we talk to them and we gather the data. Second thing is, we want to take the data from the people who are doing, preparing for MDS, but we don't go to them. We browse certain forums and we just take out something that has been, already gathered or written by these people or by somebody else who is talking to these people. So you understand, the first time when I was actually going and talking to the people, it was the primary data. It was the first hand data. And the second time when we were talking about the already recorded things, it was the secondary data. Okay, same thing happens as far as patients, if you're probably studying some patients with diabetes, you try to, you have decided your sample population of that, you go to the diabetic patient and gather your data directly from the patient. It's the primary data. But sometimes what we can do is, we can take the same data from some files which have already taken the data from the primary, source. Now what is the advantage and disadvantage of primary data? When we actually take primary data, what happens here is we know what we want to know. So usually we get the whole set of data because we are taking it for a purpose of research, and we have already jotted down, what we need from these people, and we ask them or we gather the samples or whatever, isn't it? So it's usually complete. But when we actually take the secondary data has been gathered for some other purposes. For example, it may be just some hospital records or something. Okay, secondary data is not gathered for our purposes, and we are just trying to fit that data into our purposes. So there is a possibility that the data is incomplete or data is not exactly the way our research needs. Okay, that's a disadvantage. But there is one advantage in the secondary data, that's totally unbiased. Because it was not taken for your study. It was taken by somebody else. Isn't it? Yes, it's cost effective and it is very good for retrospective studies. Okay, wherein we are actually going and analyzing something that has happened in the past. Isn't it? Yeah. No, duration doesn't come into picture over here right now. But what I'm talking about retrospective is something which has happened in the past and has been recorded already, and we can use that data. Okay. So are you clear with the difference between the primary data and the secondary data? Yeah, kind of easier to collect. Okay, now we come to sampling part. We just now saw why we do sampling. We cannot analyze the population as a whole because it's a huge task to do, and sometimes it's not feasible also. Okay, so what we try to do is we take a sample. Now, when we take a sample, we want our sample to look exactly like population, isn't it? So, one second, guys. Okay. So, in that, we have two ways of doing it. One is called as purposive sample. For example, it's unbiased because, for example, if I say, I want to study the smoking history of people who have lung cancer. Okay. And I actually select two groups of people to study, people having lung cancer and people not having lung cancer. And I go and talk to them to gather the data. I'm a researcher. I already have something in my brain, my hypothesis, which I'm trying to prove. When I go to these people, I know that these people will be most probably smoking. I have that bias in my head. And when I go to these people, ones with lung cancer, I'll put up the questions in that way that they'll, you smoke and, don't you? That way. Do you smoke? And you smoke, don't you? These two are different questions. One is a very directing question. I know. So this is kind of a bias that is created because we know what study are we taking the data for. But if somebody doesn't know, why he's taking the data from the previous, they are the leading question. That's one example I'm giving you. Even the analysis differs. Even the measurement of pocket and measurement of things differ, which are subjective. And there are many things that differ because you already know what you want to analyze. Okay, but when we come to the data, secondary data, which has already been recorded, that has not been recorded for your purpose, isn't it? It was just recorded for some other reason, and it will not be biased for your study. Okay, so although that is one point, right, there are many cross-linkings over here, but this much you understand, that's enough right now. Okay, now when we come to sampling part, right, we say that we are selecting the sample. We want our sample to be exactly like population. We know the study what we are conducting. Now many a times for our study, there are some group of people who are better suited, they'll be following our instructions better, or they'll be able to do some things better, or maybe they are easily accessible, they live close to your place of research and all that. If such factor come into picture and you purposely or deliberately select some people to represent the population, it will not be representing the population. Now, this kind of thing will be called as purposive or deliberate selection, but this is not the right way of doing a selection of the sample. Our sample has to be random. Okay, random is also called as probability sample. What is random? Random is you take the whole population, put them in a bowl. You take the whole population, put them in a bowl and randomly pick up the people for your study. Okay, that's the ideal random sampling. Okay, sounds a little bit tricky. How can you put the whole population in a bowl? We'll talk about that later. Okay, right now what I'm trying to say is you have your whole population and you're randomly selecting people, the lottery system, to pick up the people for your research, and every person in the population has an equal opportunity to be included in your research. You're not biased, you're not giving anybody more chance of inclusion or anybody less chance of inclusion. Yeah, pick randomly without seeing their faces or without, kind of seeing who is more interested and all that. Just randomly. Okay, without any bias. So this thing is a lottery system, and wherein every person, you see my statement, every person has an equal opportunity to be included in the study sample. This is a definition of your random selection. Okay, and since every person has an equal opportunity, or you can say every person has an equal probability, or there is a probability that anyone can be included. That is why this particular type of sampling is called as probability sample. Are you clear on why we have the name as probability sample and what is random sampling and what could be the probable definition of it? You don't have to mug up the definition here, but you have to understand the definition. Clear? Okay, see that. You're selecting the sample here, this person is raising hand and you pick up that person, and then this fish is your pet and you pick up that fish. Bug. Okay, this is very, so herein what happens, there is a bias in selecting people or some things in your study, right? But if everybody has an equal opportunity, that's the right way of sampling, and that is what is your random or probability sampling. This one was your biased or purposive sampling. You actually doing it purposely. Okay? So the first method, when we talk about the randomness, statistic needs a little bit of pictures to keep our eyes open. Well, it's not so bad, it's the way how you take it. Whenever I read statistics, nowadays, older days even I was very much apprehensive about it, but now when I read statistics, I kind of get lost in it. Many a times you keep reading, there's so much to know. It's not boring once you start taking interest in it. Okay, so hopefully, I should be able to maintain your interest at least till the end of the class. That would be a big achievement. Okay. So, when we talk about the simple lottery, we had been talking about, we're taking the random sample, and this is the simplest method that we take a lottery, or we generate a table of random numbers. Now, this table of random numbers is mathematically or computerized generation of the random number, and based on that random number, we call in the people to be included in our samples. That's really random, and this is the best representative of population. Okay, so you get this point? Yeah. Now, but there are certain conditions. Now we'll start applying the conditions, I'll keep telling you the scenarios. Now, what happens is, sometimes it's difficult to generate a random number and take up the samples randomly. So we have one more method of doing the same thing, that is called a systematic random sampling. Herein what we do is we pick up the first person randomly. So this is the first number, this is a random number we took out by a lottery or anything. It was just a random number, and after that we take every nth number. It could be every third, every fourth, or every nth person of the population. Get the point? So because we have taken the first one randomly, that first random number maintains the randomness of the subsequent numbers. So that is called a systematic random sampling. Okay, very commonly done in defined set of population. For example, if you are doing a study in the classroom, isn't it? or something, we very commonly can do this kind of a method, or systematic random. It's comparatively simple to apply as compared to the random sampling. Okay, so we are kind of simplifying the same process of making the randomness, okay, by doing all this. Then we have the stratified sample, random sampling. Now here what we do is, this thing is done when we know that our population has known stratas in it. For example, in a classroom, okay, I'll take an example of a classroom. We know that there are some 20 girls and there are some 20 or 25 boys. Okay, now we know that 20 girls and 25 boys are there, and when we actually take a simple random sampling, we get all 5 as boys. You know, there is a possibility, right? It's a random sample. You can get all 5 as boys, isn't it? Now, this kind of a data wherein we already know that there is a special grouping inside the main population, our sample is not exactly representing the population. In this case, what we do is we do a stratification so that every strata is represented in the sample. Okay, every known strata is represented in the sample. So what we do is we first stratify them. Okay, for example, we needed 6 samples. Let's make it 6. That will make us easy to understand. We needed 6 samples. So we made 2 groups. Group A, girls. Group B, boys. And we took 3 samples from Group A and we took 3 samples from Group B. Okay, now you will say that this is biased because Group B had 25 and all that. There are special methods for that. Right now, I will not go into that details. The special methods determine how many samples should be taken from Group B and how many samples should be taken from Group A and all that after stratification. Okay, but right now what you need to understand is we are trying to represent every group equally in the study. We are trying to represent every strata. Okay, so when our population is already having some strata, we use stratified random sampling. Population is divided into group, and after that the simple random samples are chosen from each group. This is a list of clients. We are using some random samples from the Caucasians, from the African Americans, and from the Hispanic Americans. You see, we have made the strata and then we select the samples. Clear? Now similar to that we have cluster sampling. When we say cluster are some naturally occurring groups or stratas, you can say. Herein we are not segregating them. They are naturally segregated out by some definitions. It could be a definition of cities or areas or something like that. So these are already formed cluster and we take random sample from every cluster. Getting the point? Therein we were actually stratifying the population based on some of our criteria, wherein we found that, okay, based on the things. Herein what we are doing is they are existing in some natural criteria and then we pick up the random sampling from every criteria. So that is cluster sampling. Okay? Clear on this? Cluster is this clusters. A cluster could be areas, it could be, the cluster of communities, which live in particular areas and all that. So that way, there are some natural groups. Yeah, I mean, they are kind of already stratified. It's a type of stratified sampling. It's a type of stratified. Now, what happens is, in our previous case, why we had to stratify? Because they were not naturally segregated. All the boys and girls were mixed. All the clients' data was mixed. So we made strata. But in some cases, there may be some natural clusters, right? We call it cluster sampling. Now, let me tell you, Saurabh, it's not that in this particular scene only this type of sampling is applicable. Okay, we can do stratified sampling in this type of data also. Are you getting the point? It's all overlapping. The choice of data. Yes, it's, yeah, strata are naturally formed. Here stratas are already formed. So these already formed strata is cluster. Yes, it's already stratified. So now it depends, what kind of research, what kind of aim you have with the research, and based on that, what kind of, sampling would be better suited to you. Now there is a possibility that there are two or more kind of sample methodology that would be suited to your study, and you may select one of those based on various other criteria. So there is no exact lineage there. You cannot just segregate everything out. Okay. Then we have the multi-phase sampling. Okay. Now you will see that the similar thing is applied, similar conditions, we have a different kind of sampling process applied. In multi-phase sampling, usually where we do it, we want our samples to be representing a bigger thing. For example, we are studying the people or the working hours of bankers from different banks of the world. So what do we expect our sample to be from? Do we go to every bank and take the data from every employee, one employee of every bank? Or do we just randomly pick up any bank of the world? Everything will get a little bit biased. If you randomly pick up some 10 banks of the world, there is a possibility that one particular country is not at all, one particular country is more included, like that, isn't it? In that particular case, wherein we are reaching a smaller, very lower group, but the upper group is very wide. In that particular case, we go with multi-phase sampling. In the example which I was talking about, what we may do is, we have n number of countries in the world. We can randomly select some countries out of them. Then we can randomly select some states or cities out of those countries, and then we can randomly select some banks out of those cities to study our bank employees. Getting the point? Why we are doing that? If we directly had selected the banks, it would not have represented the whole world properly. Right? So we are doing multi-phase sampling. So look at this example. Okay. First we take the first sample. Okay, this is Shanghai. We take the various districts. Okay, it could be urban, suburban, rural. Maybe we are trying to represent every kind of city. And then we select the blocks out of those cities randomly. For example, we are selecting 4 blocks out of every city. Then we have, here at this level we have 12 blocks total. And from that 12 blocks, we select the residential areas randomly from each block or town. So ultimately what we are doing is, we are getting the random blocks from the Shanghai. Isn't it? So herein we are kind of narrowing down the results, making the proper randomness throughout the process. Okay. So this is multi-phase sampling. Clear with all kinds of sampling? All of you? Okay. Now there is something called as Pathfinder survey. Yeah, our basic aim is our population should be represented in our study samples. Okay? And then there are many other criteria. The sample should be satisfying, that it should be maintainable, it should be feasible and all that. Okay? Now, but main criteria is, yes, the sample should represent the population. Then we have the Pathfinder survey. Okay? Now herein what we do is, we don't know what we want to study. For example, there is some kind of hypothesis and which we exactly don't know which is suitable to which group of people, which area of people and all that. So when our research, usually when we plan a research, we study the previous data. Based on the previous data, we get a hint, okay, this kind of things have been, seen more in this kind of people or that kind of people or, this group of people. And then when we design our study, based on the previous researches. Now when you go into MDS, you will first step, you will design your dissertation. What you will be doing? You'll be studying other articles, and then based on that, you will design your research. But what if you don't have? What if you're doing something, brand new, wherein you don't have any data, anything? You don't know which particular group you want to study, which particular area you want to study. In that particular case, you need a pathfinder survey. Before you can actually plan your study or design your study, decide the sample size for your study and all that, you have to do a pathfinder survey. In that, we represent, 0.1 or 1% of the population in these different age groups. So that we exactly, kind of representing the whole age group, the important age groups especially, wherein we see the important changes. So we include in 5 years, 12 years, 15, 35 to 45 and 65 to 75 years of population, and then we take the data from them, and then we, based on this result, then we analyze our study, decide our study. So it just gives us a path by studying the main population groups, an idea. Yeah. So randomly we have taken all the groups now, and now once we get the result, we'll know that which groups we need to study further. Just don't, what happens is, until you do it yourself, you wouldn't know the base out of it. Total thing. Okay, I don't want you to know the total thing out of it right now. That's not my expectation. It's not possible. Don't underestimate statistics. Poor guys, they spend their whole life in statistics. I want you to know the basic, the basic, a broad basic. For your study, to do a certain study, you need to design a study. To design a study, you need to know something, Whom are you going to study? You need to decide what is your study population is going to be. But if you don't know anything about that particular study, I'm repeating. If you listen, I'm repeating it. Okay? I'll not go ahead till you actually get it. But understand the broader things out of it. Okay? You want to do a study on some random parameter which is not studied before. Okay? For example, you are studying the intake of some kind of a fruit. Okay? Intake of some kind of a fruit, and in particular, how much people like it or something like that, like or dislike or whatever you want to study, something like that. But you don't have any previous data. So which population group are you going to study? You don't know, right? How many people are you going to include in the study? See, sample size is decided before the study is conducted. Before the study is conducted, we estimate that this particular group of people will be, how much? 10 people, 20 people, 100 people, how many we need to study? It's not random, right? You just cannot say, I feel like studying 50 people, so I'll include 50 in my study. 50 will take 2 months and I have just 2 months, I will study 50 people. That's not the right way, although you're going to do that in your future things, but that's not the right way. Your sample population is decided based on your hypothesis before you start the study. Now, how you decide it? You need a certain data to decide it. Based on the previous research, you decide it. But if you don't have a previous research, you conduct a survey research. That's exactly like what your research will be. You conduct the same research on a survey population. So, in that, you represent these people. You take, these age groups which we were talking about. Are you getting my point? These are the representative age groups. Then you study, and based on the result you get, you decide that what will be an age group in your study now, and how many will be the people to be studied in your study based on the result you get in the Pathfinder survey. So your Pathfinder survey is a sample survey. Yes, it's the first study. We also call it a pilot study. Actually, pilot study term is not used in Pathfinder because pilot is, doing your study before doing it at a mass scale. You're getting my point. Once your study is designed, you can, to check the feasibility, whether your study is going on good. If it's a big study and you are investing a lot of money, you can do one pilot study first. That's a pilot study. But Pathfinder is actually giving a path to your study. Understand the point? So you just do one Pathfinder study, and based on that, based on the results, you get to know how many samples you need, what kind of age group, or other data also. Okay? Data. Okay. Now look at this. Okay, for example, we did our Pathfinder. I'm coming to your question, Madhu, but listen to me, continuously listen to me, okay? So once we have our sample and age group, okay, we send the things to our statistician. Our statistician tells us that you need to study 2,000 people in X, Y, and Z group. Okay, and then we analyze the data. Now you are doubtful. Okay, probably you are doing some kind of a different, you have made a survey form, and probably you want to check whether your survey form is effectively gathering the data and all that. So after your study design is done, you can do the same design at a smaller scale before you actually go to the whole study. Okay, so you have taken some 200 samples, studied it, and done a statistical research whether we are going in a right direction or not. Isn't it? Whether we are actually getting what we're trying to get or not. So this is our pilot study. Now you get the difference between pilot study and the Pathfinder survey. Pathfinder survey is before you design your study and all that. Pilot is to check the effectiveness of what you have decided. But many a times, yes, you will find the Pathfinder and pilot being used interchangeably. Okay, as you come across this, you can keep putting me the questions and this thing. You don't have to understand the process, Saurabh. That's what. I don't want you to understand the process. No, you don't have to. No, it's not large and small scale. It's not large and small scale. Your difference not clear. Pathfinder is showing you a path to design your study. Pilot is, after you have designed your study, you just check whether your design and everything is giving you the result. Okay. Pathfinder is, you're taking out the path. You don't know what groups to be included and all that, what age group you'll be including and all that. So Pathfinder, it gives you the gross data about it. Yes, you're right, Saurabh. Pathfinder tells you, it helps you to design your study. Pilot checks the design of your study with small sample. Okay. We are not talking about comparison of the sample between Pathfinder and this thing. Are you understanding the fact now, Kamal? They are not same. But yes, you may find the use of term. See, the literal meaning of the term of Pathfinder and Pilot has come so close that different statisticians use it interchangeably. Now, statistic has a lot of controversy, but I don't want to go into that part right now. Once you get confused, come back to me again. Right now, if you are clear, let's move on. Okay. Okay. Sound is there. I'm not talking. Sound's not there? I was thinking what all to tell you, what all not to tell you. Because many times what happens is, me giving you too much extra information may create trouble. So I have to restrict myself giving you the information. So I was just thinking what all information should I give you and what all information not to give you. Okay guys, this takes hell lot of time actually, but we'll have to restrict. Okay, now based on the data what we have gathered, this is the formula. I don't want you to see how the formula is derived. I just want you to know that to know out the sample, okay, this is the formula which we use. I'll talk about it in the next part probably. Okay, I'll talk about the sample size separately for you all. Just right now know that Pathfinder survey helps us finding out the sample. Okay, let's not go into here. I want you to evaluate right now. Do you all remember these everything when you think about them? Everybody? This is something very basic and very common MCQ. This is something you need to know. Okay, totally.